Chappers fans, hail, how you doing? I thought I'd talk about guitar maintenance today. I had lots of people on the forum, monkeylordforum.com, asking me all about stringing guitars and setup and maintenance and that kind of thing. And I thought what I'd do is make one video which talks about pretty much all of those subjects, at the same time taking a regular S-type guitar and making it uber. I have a built-in, deep-seated, aggressive hatred of tremolos. I think sometimes they're just an excuse for playing a good lick, so I tend to hardtail my guitars. This is a very easy thing to do, and you can do it non-destructively, which means that once you've done it, you can reverse it and everything's completely fine. So here is a step-by-step guide on how to hardtail a guitar, restring it, and set it up. To perform the following operation, you will require some tools: screwdriver, planet wave spinny thing, some Dear Dario strings, some strong coffee, some sandpaper, a plank of wood, and finally, a saw. I'm super serial. I am sawing your head! So here's the victim, Strat. This belongs to a friend of mine, a student of mine called Ricky. Ricky is a very nice guy, and as you can see, it's just a regular Fender Strat. In fact, I think this is one of the deluxe models, so probably quite expensive. So step one is to remove all of the strings on the guitar, so we've got a great instrument to work with, nice and clean, nothing in the way. Don't use your fingers unless you're a loser. It'll take you absolutely hours and hours and hours and be a complete waste of your life. So now I've loosened off all the strings from the top, we're going to push them straight through the bridge at the bottom. But before I push them through, what I'm going to do is chop off all of these curled ends so that they don't get stuck in the mechanism of the trem. So you take your Planet Waves windy thing, which has its clippy thing on the top, and you just clip off all the crap that you don't require. So you get your guitar and you just push them from the front all the way through to the back. Once you've removed all trace of stringage, you are ready to begin the measuring process. And to make this guitar a little bit easier to handle, we're just going to unscrew the tremolo first of all. So now flip your guitar over and taking your screwdriver, we're going to undo the back plastic panel so we can get to the mechanism within. Holier than thou you are. Holier than thou you are. I don't understand. If I'm not meant for you, then why does my heart tell me that I am? Is there any way that I can stay in your... What wondrous treasure shall we find within our plastic white cave? Not much really, it's just a tremolo. But it's quite a good one. That was tuned to C sharp, this one's tuned to F. Yeah, it's definitely an F. And this one is a B. Hear that B? B, B. And what we're going to do here is undo the two screws deep inside this tremolo cavity. These little screws here, we're going to undo them so these springs are slackened right back. The reason I'm doing this is because what I want to happen is the load from the strings to pull the tremolo block into a wooden wedge, which I'm going to insert behind my tremolo cavity. Now, I still want them in place because it helps to hold the tremolo block in place, but I want them to be slack. So here is the trem cavity. You've got the three springs and you've got these two screws that I've just slackened off, so these springs are nice and groovy and wobbly. Now we're going to measure this area behind this little metal block here. So basically where my finger is, we're going to put a piece of wood. So the first thing to do is to get yourself a ruler and measure the dimensions of the hole. And make sure that you measure the depth as well as the width and the length. So now we take our saw, and we take our plank of wood and we produce some width. This was the one for my horizon. It was exactly that shape. And then I chiselled it just to make it kind of that little bit more perfect. Always start with a back cut because my dad told me to, so it must be right.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm fine.
What are you doing?
I'm just sawing up a piece of wood, love.
Why?
To make a wedge for a guitar.
I thought you were teaching rather than sawing.
I am. Wedge-tastic.
So, as you can see, I've managed to produce a magic wedge, and you've got to ensure that you put the correct magical incantation on the back for it to fully function properly. So now we're just going to pop our special magic wedge behind this tremolo block and let it give its wondrous powers of wedgeness. And make sure that once your wedge is in place, it's got a tiny bit of slack either way to move around, because this block is going to pull into it and hold it in place.
So now we're going to take our screwdriver and our screws and put the back plate back on the Strat. And now it's time to string this bad boy.
A couple of tips on stringing. What I tend to do is, because I tend to string a lot of guitars for beginners and they're affordable, in inverted commas, sometimes the block for the tremolo isn't quite moulded to the gauge of the string ends. So I give it a couple of quick tugs through and then bend it over the little bridge, and that ensures it's properly inside the mechanism. So now that my string is threaded through, what I'm going to do is measure off the exact amount I require and then do my knot. So there are two ways of measuring. The first way is you can just take it to the next peg along, push that through, and then that slack is how much you need to give you a couple of winds around the peg. But here's something else I often tend to do. Now from experience, I know if I thread this finger underneath the string and then touch the fretboard with my middle finger, kind of like this, it's exactly the right distance and the amount of string I require. So I do this, I call it my depth test. So that is exactly the amount of string I require on all of the strings to give it a couple of wraps around the post. And now that I've got my slack string, all I'm going to do is bend the string around the post to make a nice right angle, and I'm going to pull that through and I'm going to make that bend slightly more acute, and this will suffice as a knot. You don't need knots with electric guitar strings. That is as safe as houses. It's like a fishing hook.
And so now you can see it is all strung and lovely and hardtailed up and ready for Richard to take away and shred on till his heart's content. And here's another one I made earlier. Wow, check that out. Yeah, this is my Horizon, and I've done exactly the same thing to this guitar. Now this is a floating trem, not a regular Strat trem, and it still works in exactly the same way. I'm actually due to get another one of these with a hardtail, and when I do, I'll reverse this and make it into a screaming, crazy bar demon again. So now let me show you some of the reasons why I like to block off a trem. So previously, before I blocked off my floating trem, I noticed that whenever I did a dual bend, kind of like this, the trem would pull forward and slacken off the string I was holding still, detuning it, which is a pain in my arse. It's no good playing country type hybrided dual bending terror licks with a floating trem. It isn't really built for that kind of thing. With the trem hardtailed, if I'm bending one note and keeping one static, the trem stays stock, the bridge does not move, and you don't get that movement. Something else this means is that sometimes beginners or people who don't have particularly strong hands find that when they're bending a string with a trem bridge, because the trem comes up to fight against the pulling of the string, you've got to pull really hard to bend a string. Well, with a hardtail guitar, you don't have that problem. So it's actually easier to play bending notes on a hardtail bridge. And last but not least, I'm quite fond of detuning, and I teach a lot of guys, and I often find they come to me and they want to play in drop C or B or E flat or standard, and with a floating bridge you can't chop and change your tuning, it just doesn't work. So with this setup I can just undo this, drop it to D, and I'm away. So there you have it, folks, hardtail guitars. Hope you enjoy hardtailing your own bitches at home. Be safe with saws, take it easy, Chappers out.